So the Premier League season is over, the Bundesliga season is over, and as a result, we've been given this rather bizarre story brewing in Munich that Bayern Munich have turned to none other than Burnley head coach Vincent Kompany to be their next manager next season. This has come as a surprise to football fans in England and Germany alike, and as a result, I want to do a quick video looking at how this came to be. I'm going to try and break this down into 3 sections. The first one will be on how Bayern ended up on Vincent Kompany. The second one will be on what they may be seeing him as a young coach. And the third one will be focusing on the club, looking at what they do going forward, if and when Kompany is appointed as their next head coach next season. So to understand why Kompany is going to be the next Bayern Munich head coach, we have to rewind a little bit to the start of the year. Bayern were slumping in the Bundesliga. They didn't look like they were going to challenge for the Champions League. And as a result, by the time February rolled around, the club more or less announced that Thomas Tuchel would not be staying as head coach after this season. That sparked an immediate search for a next head coach, which led to Xabi Alonso being reached out to. He politely said no. Ralf Rangnick was largely interested in the job. He was expected to take the job until a kind of change of heart in the 11th hour, which saw him turn down the opportunity, and that led to Bayern begin to really scramble. There was links to guys like Roberto De Zerbi, but I think more likely, we obviously then saw the move to Oliver Glasner, Hansi Flick, and they actually at one point went back to Thomas Tuchel after a really impressive run in the Champions League, an unexpected one where they got past Arsenal, performed really well in that first leg of the semi-final against Real Madrid. There was actually a growing sense that Tuchel may end up just deciding to stay put. The club would say, let bygones be bygones, and he'll carry on to next season. But rather dramatically, ahead of the last Bundesliga match day, Tuchel announced in the press conference that would be his last press conference as Bayern Munich head coach, and he as well had turned down the opportunity to stay put at Bayern Munich. As a result, the club have really scrambled to kind of bring in a head coach that they could, really rely on next season. And while Vincent Kompany was certainly not the first choice or second, third, fourth, or even fifth choice, there are some suggestions and some hints as to why Bayern did eventually turn to him and why he could prove to be quite a good Bayern Munich head coach next season. First and foremost, we have to address the fact that Kompany obviously has a history playing in the German Bundesliga. He was obviously a defender at Hamburg before he moved on to play in the Premier League, and even there, he was known for having this kind of belief in himself, a confidence that kind of begetted his young age. And, there's quite well reported stories of him bossing around senior players, even kind of going toe-to-toe with coaches and heads in his own head coach, really, because of his understanding of the game, because of his own talents. And this was where we saw him really kind of grow into the leader that he would become at Manchester City. But what's important to note there is he has experience in German football, and quite crucially, he has a very strong grasp of the German language, which still plays a large part in how Bundesliga clubs, specifically Bayern, go around appointing their next head coach. The elephant in the room here is, of course, Burnley's dreadful season in the Premier League. It's really up for debate how much of that was down to Vincent Kompany. The club obviously relied on a lot of loan players to get them out of the Championship. There's a huge turnover in that squad towards the start of this season, and while Burnley fans would probably argue that Kompany's tactics were rather naive, especially compared to the head coach that came before him, it also kind of suggests that why Bayern Munich may be interested in Kompany. Yes, he struggled in the Premier League, but if we kind of rewind back to the previous season where Burnley really robbed to a fantastic season in the Championship, the way that Kompany won that league and the way that he was able to get his team to play is probably what Bayern are really basing all of their interest in the head coach in. If we kind of take a look at some of the stats from Burnley's season in the Championship, we can see that they played a very slow and intricate style of football, very high possession based. In fact, Opta have some really interesting stats on this, which kind of go to show that in the 22-23 season, only Manchester City and Swansea City were better at keeping the ball and making passes when we compare them to all teams in the top 2 divisions. That, I think, is probably where we have to focus on what Kompany's strengths are as a head coach. He is a student of Pep Guardiola. He likes to play that possession style of football. He likes to play that kind of 4-3-3 formation that can kind of shift into a 3-5-2 when his teams are attacking. And It's not entirely dissimilar to what Xabi Alonso has implemented at Bayer Leverkusen. Of course, remember back to what I just mentioned a moment ago, that Alonso was Bayern's first choice to be their head coach, not just because he was winning games at Leverkusen, but the manner in which he was doing so. Pep Guardiola still kind of looms large over Bayern Munich from the way that he came into the club. Still that kind of tiki-taka style of attacking football, where his teams dominate possession, dominate the chances, and obviously do very well in the league campaigns. That's what Bayern are looking for. And if they couldn't get in Xabi Alonso, they then turn to the next best guy, which is Vincent Kompany, another disciple of Pep Guardiola, another young head coach who's determined to develop his coaching career by doing the same sort of tactics and systems that Pep Guardiola has done at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and now Manchester City. So in a way, how Burnley played in the Championship is how Bayern want to play next season under Vincent Kompany. And if he can do that, then he may find some sort of success at the club. I know it sounds very bizarre because of what happened in the Premier League, but in that Championship season against teams of equal measure, teams of equal financial strength, and of course teams with less money, Burnley succeeded extremely well playing Vincent Kompany's possession style of football. And at Bayern Munich, he'd be able to implement that in similar circumstances. The intriguing thing is, what does this mean for Bayern Munich going forward? Of course, they've kind of got some egg on their face from the manner in which they have kind of turned to a number of head coaches who've all turned them down, either privately or quite publicly. But they really kind of have to put that all behind them, get Kompany over the line, pay that compensation fee, and just kind of move on from here. We talked about the tactics that Kompany wants to play, and probably the tactics that would work quite well at Bayern Munich. But the issue as well that has to be addressed this summer is the fact that this team needs a huge overhaul. Not only have we seen that with Thomas Tuchel and the way that he grumbled about the state of the squad, but we saw the Julian Nagelsmann before him, and it even goes all the way back to Hansi Flick, more or less left the club because of his disagreements with the board, with the sporting directors, and the chief executives over the players that were brought in, but also the players that were allowed to leave. Kompany will not be inheriting a team that is the best in German football. It's not a team who've played well for a number of years now, and it's a team that have quite a lot of big stars who have to be moved on. And, even though Kompany is an inexperienced head coach, he obviously has a belief in himself as a very successful player, and he might be able to kind of go into that dressing room and demand the kind of respect that maybe a kind of more senior head coach wouldn't do. Obviously, the players wouldn't respect Kompany for what he's achieved as a coach, but they would respect him for what he achieved as a player. And if he's the guy calling the shots, he can stand up to those older players and say, look, your time's done. We have to move on. We have to bring in new players. And that's something that a lot of head coaches at Bayern have struggled with in the past. According to reports in Germany, Kompany's appointment is almost single-handedly at the hands of Max Eberl, who was brought in as sporting director at the start of this season. For people who don't follow German football, there's an interesting kind of hierarchy where you have Sebastian Hoeneß on top, who's not officially in charge of the club, but he's an honorary member of the board. He still more or less calls the shots. But if Max Eberl was able to appoint Kompany as the next head coach and be in charge of the players that come and go, you'll have this kind of interesting duo at the heart of Bayern Munich where they kind of can work hand in hand, knowing that they have each other's back and they're able to kind of rebuild that squad, in tandem with one another. And that could go a long way to kind of mending the fences and kind of just fixing this kind of circus that's been going on at Bayern. There has been a power struggle. There's been a power vacuum in terms of head coaches coming in and kind of butting heads with the board. But if Max Eberl is able to bring in a guy off the back of his own demands, and Vincent Kompany knows that, then we do suddenly have a synchronization between head coach and the guys above him, rather than what we've seen under Tuchel, Nagelsmann and Flick, where those two kind of positions in the club have butted heads. So, Vincent Kompany is an inexperienced head coach, and he is the guy who saw Burnley get relegated from the Premier League this season, but he does have a track record in playing attacking, possession-based football, and that's the kind of tactics that Bayern Munich would want to instill in the Bundesliga next season. Equally, if he comes in as Max Eberl's appointed head coach, you would think he'd be able to kind of fend off any of the kind of courtroom drama that has really dogged Tuchel, Nagelsmann and Flick's time at the club. Whether it works or not, we'll have to wait and see, but it's an exciting appointment and one that Bayern Munich may end up finding to be quite a shrewd move in the future.